Hello boys and girls. Today I'm going to tell you a story. But before I start, I want to ask you if you know what wisdom is and foolishness is. If you don't, you have to ask your mummies and daddies. But I'll tell you later. In the meanwhile, I'm going to do a story about this little girl. This little girl lives in Korea. And they had lots of trouble in Korea. There was so much fighting and so many horrible things happening. And the children lost their mummies and daddies. And somehow they just never been able to find them again. So they were living alone on the streets. And this little girl here, she was living in this funny little house she made out of cardboard because she had no house to go to. She got a little basket, and in this basket she used to put it down and she used to say, please can you give me some money? Please can you give me some money for food? And then they would sometimes give her a bit of money, not much money. And then one day somebody just came and took a little fish and just dropped it on her lap like that and said, yeah, there's some fish for lunch for you. And she was so happy. She said, thank you, sir, for the fish. Thank you, sir, for the fish. And she had a little dog with her. This little dog was her only thing in life. She used to talk to this little dog. And you can see she used to collect little bits of old food for the dog. And she didn't know where to get the food, but she had to keep this little dog because it was the only little thing she could talk to. And this was what happened every day. And then one day, she saw two children coming, and she knew them because they used to live in the same street with her in a funny little house just like her. And as they came past, they looked at her as if she was just nobody at all. And then she said to them, hello, where are you going with that basket? And they said, we're going to collect wood with the basket. We're going to go and find wood, and we're going to take it and put it in that basket. And when we put it in the basket, we take it home, and then we give it to our mommy and daddy, and we make a fire. And then she makes us some nice hot soup. And this little girl thought, that's terrible. And she put her foot out, and she tripped the little girl, and the little girl fell. And she said, you're horrible, why are you tripping me? So she says, because I don't think you're talking the truth. I think you're lying to me. You don't have a mommy and daddy. I don't believe that. None of us have got mommies and daddies. And you lived here before, and you didn't have a mommy and daddy then. Yes, I said, but we do now. And you're just horrible. You just hurt my knee now because you made me trip, and all the wood has gone down. So she got up, and she helped to put the wood back in the basket, and so that they could take it home to their mommy and daddy like they said. And you know, she watched them and she said, is it the truth? Have you really got a mommy and daddy? He says, well, haven't you seen the little house down the road? It's got a little yellow roof and it's got 4 rooms in it, and they take lots of children in. First of all, it was just me and my brother. And then it was 2 of our friends. And then there were 3 other children. And now there's so many children in that house, but they still give us food, but they can't take any more children. And she looked at them and she said, won't they take me? No, there's no more room for anybody. And besides, you threw our wood out. And you too, Ruff. And so she looked at them and they walked away, carrying their wood back to their mommy and daddy. She followed them, and then she thought, no, she's going to run after them. And she got up from where she was sitting and she ran as fast as she could. She ran behind the tree. She hid behind the tree so that they wouldn't see her. And then she'd hide, and she'd hide behind a building so that they wouldn't see her, because she didn't want them to know that she was following them. She ran down and she ran quietly behind them, quietly. So she watched them go and she thought, I think I'll follow them. And she ran after them and she hid behind, she got up quickly and she went and she hid behind a tree and she looked to see if she could see them. Could she see them? Yes, there they were. And she ran again and she went behind another tree and she looked again and she said, oh, there's a building, and she ran behind the building. And then eventually she saw which house they went into, and there she stood quietly by the house. Then she walked forward and she walked forward and she looked in, and they'd left the door open. And as she looked in, the children saw, and they said, oh, there she is. She's the girl that tripped us. She's the girl that threw all our wood out. She's the girl that hurt my leg. Mr. Peck came to the door. He said, what's your name? And she said, my name is Kai, sir. That's a pretty name, Kai. And these other children were looking there. They weren't very happy that he was talking to her. And Mr. Peck said to her, tell me, Kai, would you like a bit of hot soup tonight? Oh, she said, I just love some hot soup. I've never, or did once, but never have I had hot soup for a long time. And And he said, well, come inside. Then she said, she started to shake a little bit, and she said, Mr. Pack, they call you Mr. Pack. Can't you give me a place to stay too? And he said, oh, sweetheart, we don't have much room. He looked at his wife, and his wife came and he said, I think we can take one more. And then he said, now, oh, that's great. If we can take one more, you can become one of our children too. Then she turned to him and she said to him, tell me, Mr. Pack, can I call you Daddy too, like the other children call you Daddy and Mommy? And he put his arms around her and he said to her, my dear little Kai, you can be our little girl. We will call you Kai and you can call us Mommy and Daddy. Now all of you children, come with me into the lounge, into the little lounge. We're going to squeeze tightly together because there's not much room. Let's go and sit down there. And I'm going to tell you a story about being wise and being foolish. Something happened today with this little girl, Kai, made a bit of a mistake. She was a bit like the foolish man who built his house upon the sand. And I'm going to explain to you what the difference is between wise and foolish, because sometimes children don't know, and it's good for them to know because then they wouldn't make mistakes. And now, Kai, I want you to come and sit on my lap, and I'm going to tell you children, all of you in this lounge today, I'm going to tell you how to be wise and not to be foolish. Woof, 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 woof. Oh, Mr. Pack, Dad, my little doggy. I forgot about my little doggy. Oh, Mr. Pack, Dad, must I leave my doggy outside or can he stay here too? I'll go and look in the dirt bins for food for my doggy. Mr. Pack looked at her with very big eyes and he said, Kai, of course you can have your little doggy with you. He's welcome to stay in our house too, and we'll always have a little bit of food for him so you can keep your little doggy. All right, now let's get on with the story about the wise man and the foolish man, and let's find out what is foolish and what is wise. Today, little Kai was sitting at her house, and when her little friends came past, they weren't her friends so much anymore because they'd moved away. But when they came past, they said they're coming to collect wood, and she felt a little bit jealous of that. She didn't like to know that they are doing things for their mommy and daddy. She didn't even believe them that they had a mommy and daddy. But she took the little girl, and the little girl fell and she hurt her knee, and she was very, very sad. And she said, I'm cross now, I don't like you, because she didn't want her to be a friend anymore. And then, Kai, you followed her all the way home. And when you came there, what happened? You knocked on the door, and we opened the door, and we welcomed you in. Now, a little while before, you were a foolish little girl. You were being nasty and horrible. They didn't do anything to you, and you took them, and then you didn't even say sorry. You just came running to see where they live. And I can see you feeling sorry now, and that's the main thing. And so in life we find that sometimes you can do foolish things. It's like when you build a little house. When a builder builds a house, they make the stone in the ground, and then they put one stone, one brick on, and they build a house with it, and they make a brick house, a house that won't fall down. But then the foolish man, he says, I'm not going to waste time putting cement between blocks. I'm not going to waste time doing that. I'm going to build my house on the sand. Then I don't have to worry with blocks. It's all nice and smooth, and I can easily build a house, and it won't take so much time, and it'll look just as nice as the house on the rock. And so they started to build, and the man built his house on the rock. It took a bit longer because it was harder to work with. You had to chop the stone and you had to work hard. But he was a wise man because he knew that when the rain came, that it would stand. But the foolish man didn't think that way. He thought, I'm just going to do it the quick and easy way. Nothing will happen to it because it's made out of, I'm going to build my house on sand. It'll also be a strong house. The only difference would be that it's on sand. But that was the difference. The one man built his house on the sand, which couldn't hold if it rained because there's no foundation, there's no rocks underneath. But the man who builds his house on the rocks, that house is going to stand. And you know what happened? When the rain came, and the rain came down, and the floods came up, and the water came higher and higher and higher, and the rains came, and it fell on the house, and the stone house, the house that was built on the rock, just stood there. Nothing happened to the house. It was just like water running over. And then the rain came too, and it went on the house with the sand. And the sand came and it came and just fell down all the way. And oh my word, what happened to the house on the sand? It just broke all together because, do you see? And when the rain came on the sandy house, it just all crumbled and there was nothing left. And he looked at his house and he started to cry. And then he thought, oh, if only I built my house on the rock and not on the sand. And this is a story that Jesus told. There were lots of people there that day, and he told them the story so that they could remember. And he said to them, if you are clever and you're building a house, you'll build it on stone, on a rock. But if you're not clever and you are foolish, you'll build it on the sand. And that's how it is with our little lives. If you're good every day and you put a little stone in, then what happens? Your little house gets bigger and bigger and better and better. And every day you put a stone and it becomes stronger. And sometimes you make a mistake and you think, oh, no, I can't put that stone in this house. That's not a good stone. But at least when the house is finished, it's very strong. And that's like your little life. It's like your little heart that you've built up. Every day you do good things, and when you do naughty things, you ask Jesus to forgive you. You ask your mommy or your daddy or friend to forgive you, and then that's all right. But when you build your house upon the sand, you put your little rock in, and your rock is, one rock is good, and then the next day you put in and you get cross with your mommy or with your friend, and that doesn't have a strong foundation. It's all on the sand. And then one day you realize you just didn't do the right thing. You have a foolish house because you're a foolish man, because you built all of your things on the sand. And the sand are bad things you do and things that you do every day that aren't good. That's like building on the sand. But if you do good things every day and you try hard to be good, and Jesus helps you to be good, we get good by asking Jesus to help us, then you're building your house upon the rock. And you all know that little song, the wise man built his house upon the rock. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and that's what we must always remember. So we're going to say a little prayer now and ask Jesus to help us always to remember. And then I want you to listen to the music, and I want you to sing your song that you know so well. Let us close our eyes. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that we're here today. We thank you, dear Lord, that you help us to learn about being foolish and being wise. Help us to remember the story. Help us to remember that if we're kind and good, and if we're kind and good like the story told, like that mommy and daddy that took all the little children in, then we're building our house upon the rock. But dear Jesus, if we fight and we do ugly things and we're nasty to people, then we're building our house upon the sand. And we don't want to build our house on the sand. We want to build it on the rock. And we pray that you'll always help us to remember the story for Jesus' sake.